What's good, y'all? Back on the Tuesday night live stream, the better late than never live stream. It's my 19th anniversary. And so my wife, my my wife Brandy's been gracious enough. She's like, boy, go ahead and do the live stream. This is what you've been doing. Um, you know, and it gets me out of her hair for a little bit of time anyway. So I'm back on with y'all. Before we get too far into it, I'm gonna give you a little bit of background. Last week when I was doing the stream, I had elements of it that cut out. Like it completely cut out, wasn't functional, completely non-functional parts and chunks of this thing. And so I felt like I was under an obligation to come back and redo the thing. Just because I don't want to leave y'all like that. I don't want to give half answers and stuff like that. And it was really hard to figure out where that part of the live stream went. Like it disappeared. And so even watching it back, there's a whole a chunk of it that's missing. And so that's what I'm doing. So I'm be rehashing some stuff. I've updated some of my takes from last week. And so there's going to be enough new stuff in here, I think, to keep y'all engaged. Plus, um, they've actually given me StreamYard has graciously added sound effects so that I can add sound effects to my live stream. So we're gonna be playing around with these tonight. All right. So without further ado, this is Brian with the Blurting While Dad live stream, soon to be the Blurting While Dad podcast, because that's what I'm going to start pushing this as. And I'm going to be really pushing this on my I'm going to have a Patreon level. I'm going to have the unedited unedited live streams, and I'm going to add a lot more to the unedited ones, the thoughts that aren't necessarily conducive to what social media allows us. So here's me playing around with the sound effects. All right, I mess with that. So anyway, I'm gonna try a couple other ones. Oh, so we got a gunshot and train whistle and police explosion. All right, all these is getting added. So anyway, um, before we get too far into this, make sure that you're liking and following me on whatever platform you consume. I know not everybody's present everywhere. I don't expect y'all, if you ain't on Facebook, I don't expect y'all to hop on Facebook and rock with me. But if you do have YouTube, I would love for y'all to be gracious enough to bless me with your eyes on YouTube. I'm going to be doing some live stuff on TikTok once I get that up and running. I still got to play around with it so I understand the platform a little bit better. So I would love for y'all to join me wherever you consume this stuff. And then once I start clipping this down into podcast episodes, you'll get a chance to hear the full thing without having to be present here. So that's what the goal is. All right. So tonight I'm going to be kind of going back and talking about some of the stuff that I feel like I cut out, or some of the ideas and takes that I felt like evolved from last week. The one I'm going to really trim. So I did a little bit more research, and one of the things is one of my biggest pet peeves is superheroes with really vaguely defined powers. Like superheroes with vaguely defined powers drives me nuts. And from a superhero comic book, there's so many different things that require our imagination, that I feel like the power set that the character is working with should be consistent. Okay. And it's not. I mean, there are superheroes where I think a lot of times the hero is drawn and somebody's like, "Oh, that looks dope." Like they looked at the character drawing and like, that looks dope. Now we got to figure out what they do, and then they just kind of slap some powers on it. It doesn't make a ton of sense. And so I was a huge fan of the Krakoa era at first. In Marvel comic books with the X-Men, I really did enjoy the Krakoa era. I liked the fact that they were doing a lot of world building with that. Um, a lot of backstory behind Apocalypse. Like for those that don't know, this was like a story that really featured Apocalypse and built out where he came from, who his people were, and stuff like that, and then added a whole nother chunk to Krakoa, myth of Krakoa, by saying Krakoa was actually it's actually two islands that used to be one. So it's Krakoa and Araco, and they got separated. And I'm not going into the whole thing because it is confusing as hell. But one of the things that came across was the Iraqi mutants, the people that were on Araco. Those level of mutants were supposed to be way more powerful than the X-Men, just because they're battle hardened. And I like that. I like the fact that yes, they constantly had battles and they're fighting against demonic hordes and everything, and so their entire life was battle. Okay, I dig that. And that would lead you, like, if you're born into that world, you know how to utilize your weapons, and they called your mutant power your weapon. So you knew how to utilize your mutant power no matter what it was for survival. And it was kind of a steel sharpening steel situation. Okay, I rock with that. But then they kind of took this leap. For those that don't know, if you don't know, like if you follow X-Men or Marvel, they started this classification of Omega level mutant, and it's always been kind of specious how they did it, right? Like, it was never clearly defined. First, it was if your body could survive death, like if your powers allowed you to exist in an incorporeal form or whatever, where a non-corporeal form where you didn't have a physical body and your powers allowed you to surpass that. And so that was a real one definition. And then they kind of expanded it out to mutants that had powers that had no upper limits. And so that brought in like some of the mainstays that you see, like Storm, you know, and Magneto, and a couple of other ones that got listed fell under that Omega level category. And so now they're saying all the Rocky mutants are Omega level. Okay, I get it. So when you say that to me, I'm like, okay, so we're dealing with people that have powers that have no upward threshold or limit. All right, I can rock with that. But then we actually get into the characters. um, and that's where the Omega level thing falls apart. And it's almost like what happened with Dragon Ball with Super Saiyan, like where initially, your Super Saiyan was the highest level, the pinnacle, the peak, and then they started adding layers and layers and layers onto the Super Saiyan thing to the point where it's like, well, Super Saiyan 3 isn't good enough, so now we need to have, Super Saiyan God, and then Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan, and all this other stuff. And it kind of diluted the impact of what the original thing was, Super Saiyan. Because I remember watching it, and when Goku first went Super Saiyan to take out Frieza, that shook the world, bro. Like, that distorted the world, like, yo! And so it kind of changed how we perceived it. And then when Gohan took it to another level to defeat Cell, like, our minds were blown. But then you started doing it like where it doesn't make any sense. Like, there's too many Super Saiyans, and you don't really know the difference between them. They don't really expressly say. Like, they'll kind of say, well, this one consumes more power, and Super Saiyan 3 you can't do. But it got watered down, and they never really built any lore about the concept of Super Saiyans, because it's like, okay, so now Goku's Super Saiyan, but now we gotta make Vegeta Super Saiyan, and the kids are Super Saiyans. And now all the Saiyans are Super Saiyans, and in Dragon Ball, where it used to be that there was one, and then they switched around and said, okay, well, now Broly is the legendary Super Saiyan, so basically Broly is the Hulk. Broly's the Hulk. And so it got convoluted, and so that's what I feel like is happening with Marvel. And my fear is what's going to happen is we're going to end up into another one of these things where there's too many mutants, and they're going to have some weird super extinction level event. And they try to do it with the fall of Krakoa, where Nimrod came and killed everybody at the Hellfire Gala, but they brought people back. I feel like that's what's going to end up happening, where Marvel has way too many mutants, and too many power sets running around, and too many mutants that share the same power set, and we're going to end up having another one of those Genosha massacres or Decimation, with House of M and stuff. And a lot of good characters are going to get shelved just because they feel like add-ons, because the writers didn't have enough time to spend with them. And so that's what my fear is. But I digress. Okay. So I think one of the OGs in the X-Men lore, specifically when it came to vaguely defined powers, and Marvel's always been really transparent about how the powers work. Like, it's always kind of a science-based thing. DC is a little bit more ambiguous. And so you don't quite know what somebody's powers are. They'll say it, but then they'll add nuances to it, or there's some kind of magical, mystical explanation or whatnot. Or you just have, he's super powerful because he fires blasty bolts out of his hands. The Phantom Stranger kind of falls in that, where the Phantom Stranger is kind of a, whatever we need his powers to be for this story is what the powers are going to be. And so, but in the X-Men comic books, the Morrison era, the first one I remember, where I'm like, what the is his power, is Zorn. Right. And Morrison is good at giving you really kind of ambiguous powers. I love Grant Morrison, but his stuff, some of his writing is you cannot leave your brain at home. You got to bring it with you. But Zorn, and Zorn's power is he has a star in his head. He has a star for a face. And he can create a black hole with his face. Oh, okay. Well, he can manipulate gravity. Okay. And he can manipulate, he can mess around with electromagnetism. Okay. And he can heal. He can heal others. Like, wait a minute. What does one thing have to do with the other? And it started going down this rabbit hole of whenever Zorn popped up on the panel, his powers were wherever's going to be to further the plot. And then they said, well, Zorn ain't Zorn no more because Zorn was actually Magneto. You're like, what happened to Zorn? Well, Zorn, there's two Zorns. And it just became this entire thing because what happened was it felt like Morrison had an idea of the reveal of Zorn is actually Magneto back from the dead. And the Marvel kind of said, well, we built this character Zorn and he kind of has a fan base, so we need to keep him in play. And it became really confusing with the lore. But at the same time, I feel like his powers from the jump were super confusing and not really transparent about what it was. You know, he's healing people, matter manipulation, like all kinds of other stuff that don't really make sense for a dude that has a star for a face. And we're assuming that the baseline is we're assuming that a person with a star for a face makes sense. That's a baseline assumption. We're assuming that star for face man has like it's a logical power set, but we're kind of giving some grace on that. Okay, so and I ran over a whole lot of these. The one that's the most egregious, I think, well, there's two that's the most egregious from the Rocky Mutants with X-Men. Iska the Unbeaten. Her power is she can't lose. So she's a plot device. Iska the Unbeaten's power is being a plot device. But they didn't really stand on their square with it because she does lose. And so what happens when the mutant who cannot lose loses? Well, she changes sides. That's her power. She can't lose, and when she does lose, she changes sides. That's terrible. I'm sorry. The character design looks cool and everything. They've told some really interesting stories around this character, but it's dumb. Like, it's a dumb power set. And so there's like, well, she's a mega level mutant. Okay. And she has the inability to lose. Okay. So does she have like luck based powers like Domino, kind of reality warping, low level reality warping powers, like, you know, in the vein of like Mr. M or Proteus or Scarlet Witch? Well, she can't lose. She has the power to win no matter what. Is that a power though? Or is it a personality trait? Because if your superpower is you can never lose, but when you do lose, you switch sides, that ain't a superpower anymore. You're actually making a choice now. So when Jerry Jones, and I'm crossing outside of nerd stuff and getting into sports nerd stuff. So with Micah Parsons, right? When Jerry Jones finally shafted Michael Parsons and Mike, what's the boy's name? I think it's Micah Parsons. I'm running two names together because I know somebody with that name. When he finally shafted Micah Parsons, right? And sent him to traded him to Green Bay. And all those Cowboys fans say, I'm no longer a Cowboy fan. Do they have mutant abilities too? Or is this just a Marvel thing? Like I said, she has the inability to lose. So she has limited psychokinesis, which affects chance. And she can shapeshift to to help her. And immune to power negation, so her powers can't be shut off. But I don't know what her powers are. Like, inability to lose is not a power, y'all. Y'all telling me, oh yeah, man. So she has no ability to lose, and that's what her power is. But when she does lose, but if she can't lose, then how does she lose? How does this work? What are the mechanics of this? And I feel like this was one of those things where, like, we have to give her a power. We call her Iska the Unbeaten. So it's got to align with the fact that she never takes an L. So we have to figure out a way to make her never take an L. But we're also playing on a higher level with supremely powerful mutants and supremely powerful characters. So it doesn't necessarily help us to have this unbeatable character when we're actually bringing in even bigger dogs. And so we're like, well, when she does lose, she just switches sides. That's one of those things where when that happened, it took me out of the book. It took me out of the book because I'm sitting there like, well, how does this make sense? So her power is to never lose, but then when she loses, but if she does lose, she switches sides, so she never loses. But she was in the process of taking the L. Like, she's in the process, like the L was occurring. It was actively occurring for her, and she was actively experiencing it. And she said, nope, I'm switching sides. Dang, she activated her mutant power. It doesn't make any sense. And so you've given this power to you've defined her as an omega level mutant. She's supremely powerful and all powerful, but her power is to switch sides when she starts losing. This is the kind of writing I'm talking about. Okay. And her unbeatability is it's done. It's dumb. And so I think they kind of wrote themselves into a hole and said, okay, well, if she does lose, then she just switches sides. That's how we solve that problem. Okay. And there's one more. There's a couple on here where I spent some more time on it, but Kobach the Never Held. He shoots spikes and quills. That's what he's an omega level mutant, which means there's no upper known threshold to his ability, but he shoots spikes and quills. This really feels like we drew this character. We need to come up with some kind of power set for them because they're on the panel. That's exactly what it felt like. It doesn't make sense. Spikes or quills. There's other mutants that do the same thing. I've never met a porcupine that was a threat to take over the planet. And they said he shapeshifts or whatever, but they never really showed it. I don't think, if I remember in the books, I remember. But it's one of those things where it's like, okay, you drew this hero. He looks cool. You just got to slap a power on him. And we already established in this world that all the mutants are omega level. And I feel like it becomes this thing where you're doing reaching top shelf for your threats. And you have to keep trying to out top your original threats. And the power scaling, it becomes impossible at that time. Because it's like, okay, so how do the X-Men, run-of-the-mill X-Men that we know and love, how do they even compete with this? And how do we go back to telling stories about them where there's this planet full of this planet, because they terraform Mars, there's a planet full of these superior omega level mutants with vaguely defined power sets. How do we tell stories about regular run-of-the-mill X-Men when you have each one of these characters that should be able to solo an X-Men team by themselves? I think that was kind of the trend that started going. And I feel like around the middle of the Krakoa era, there was some kind of mandate or something that came down and said, you guys got to speed this shit up. And they just started rattling off stuff, and a lot of plot threads were left dangling. A lot of things were left unexplained. A lot of characters were left unfleshed out, and that ended up becoming problematic because You have people, you've introduced them to this new world of the X-Men, and now we're just cutting it off. And it's out of sight, out of mind until the next writer picks it up. So that's what my take on it was. Like I said, my stuff evolved a little bit. I didn't want to pick too much on it because I don't necessarily really like picking on characters. I rather say, hey, this is what this character is, and this is how I think they can be better. That's kind of what I do with my character issues. I got the next one cooking right now. Because I just did Black Bolt, I got Cyclops, and I'm doing one for Tim Drake that should be posting later on this week. So be on the lookout for that one. Okay. I already went through the Sydney Sweeney thing. I talked about how you couldn't put a black woman in the Sydney Sweeney thing. I'm in the ad. I don't want to beat that horse to death because really it's just a flashpoint. It's kind of like it's kind of like the Cracker Barrel thing, where it's just a flashpoint for idiots who want to have arguments about nothing. And racist folks who want to who have a little level of emptiness in their life and they need to bang against something to feel something. And I don't necessarily want to go down that rabbit hole again. It frustrates me. But what I will say is this. And so I'm jumping ahead to jump backwards because there's 2 points I need to make here. So the biggest point is, and this is the one that really, this is what got cut out of last week's live stream. So this is where I want to spend a lot of my time. Okay. I am thoroughly convinced that, and you can quote me on this one. So I'm gonna see if I can find an appropriate sound effect, but you could quote me on this one. Jubilee is yeah, Jubilee. Hold on. Let me finish. So Jubilee is a CIA operation. It is. I feel like it is it I feel like it exists to divide the community, specifically black folks, to target us with rage bait. Um and there's no convincing me otherwise because they just dropped the black men versus black women video, and I've intentionally muted a lot of the discourse around that because I don't want to see it. Because there's nothing that's going to come out of that. There's nothing good that's coming out of that Jubilee discussion. Black men versus white women, the black men that only date white men. There's nothing positive coming out of that. And I feel like Jubilee is agitprop, agitation propaganda meant to piss us off, meant to get us fighting over nothing, and basically turning conversation and dialogue into sport, where there are winners and there are losers. And oftentimes when you do that, specifically the way Jubilee does their stuff, they have their casting calls and everything. So basically, you can have propagandists just show up. And those that understand the function of propaganda, if you don't understand how propaganda works, it does not work the way that a lot of people think that it works. Oh, shoot, I got comments. What's up? It makes more sense. It's logical. Oh, yeah, man. Vegeta's my favorite, though. Oh, bro, hey, my fault, bro. I appreciate you tuning in, man. I missed the comments because the way this thing is set up. But yeah, Vegeta was my favorite Dragon Ball character too. And being stronger, being battle hard makes sense. It's logical. I do agree with that. And I think that was an interesting thread that came out with that, bro. I do think that sorry, I'm still figuring out the live stream thing. I do think that it makes more sense being battle hardened because, and I feel like they should have left it at that instead of saying now they're Omega level mutants, where they're all Omega level mutants, because I feel like I felt like that was a cop out. I felt like, okay, so now instead of just saying they're all battle hardened and have an entire lifetime fighting battles with their powers, you know, and just saying they're all Omega level, I feel like you're kind of jumping a shark. And I feel like it went higher than it really needed to go. So I feel that, and I agree with you on that. So anyway, the Jubilee thing, For me, I feel like it's a psyop. I feel like it exists to as a mass distraction. Like I said, they cast for Jubilee, like right? They do the casting for Jubilee. And what happens is when you put out a casting call, you're basically saying, I need people that are going to be good on TV. Right. And cool. I need people that are going to be good on TV. All right, cool. But then show comments on stage. I'm gonna start doing that. But what happens is that means when you're saying I need people that are going to be good on TV, then you're going to bring in the most extreme personalities and the ones that are going to go look better best on camera. That's what you're leaning into. You're not bringing in the people that actually have sound logical points. You're bringing in the people that can be the loudest or the most entertaining, and or generate the most rage or look the stupidest. And that's really what you're existing with. But for a propagandist, if they can if they have charisma, they can absolutely use Jubilee as a platform to spread. Because for, like I said, the function of propaganda, the way propaganda works is it doesn't matter if you bring the propagandists on and you dunk all over their talking points. Like if you jump on there and dunk on their talking points, don't matter to no propagandist, bro. Their goal, their function as an entity who is spewing propaganda is they are disseminating it. So their goal is to reach as many ears and eyeballs as possible. It doesn't matter if they look crazy. What matters is they have a megaphone to scream they're crazy into. And they know that they're going to connect with somebody out there. One person, two people is going to align with what they say. And that's eventually their goal. Their goal is to disseminate the piece of propaganda and the message. And so having them on and having somebody do logical point by point takedowns, it sounds good on paper, but that's not really how that's really not, I mean, they don't really care about that shit. And why should they? They don't really care about, oh, well, this dude did a logical point by point takedown and dunked all over me and made me look bad. That's why when they get up there smiling, because the point's already been made. You already brought me onto the platform. You let me reach Jubilee's audience, which numbers in the tens of millions of people now. That's the function of propaganda. And so it's really an insidious thing. And so I'm concerned that we are elevating people and bad faith actors. We're elevating them, and by giving them platforms, because they all flip it into appearances on social media. I know one of the little sellouts on the Amanda Seales one went and did, he's posing in pictures of Charlie Kirk. He's trying to launch his own brand. I've seen people, the leftists, do the same thing. And it's just a vehicle for them to launch their thing. Okay. Oh, by the way, shout out to 80s Tees, bro. Y'all are cooking. Shout out to 80s Tees. So that's why I'm convinced that it's like some kind of secret governmental operation. Okay. And so I feel like, specifically, so my story with last week I was going to review one black radical versus 20 black conservatives, and I could not do it. I got 15 minutes in and said, I can't watch this shit. And I turned it off. And so my initial observations were like the very first brother they brought on here, and I'm not going to do point by point, but I'll tell you as far as I got into it. First brother they brought on there, he, instead of a dialogue, he went down a monologue. He had prepared statements that he was going to say. He was going to get his shit off no matter what happened, whether it made sense in the flow of the conversation, whether it was conversation or not. He was going to get his shit off. And that's what he did. And so he just bombarded Amanda Seales with point after point after point after point after point. It's called a Gish Gallop, but it's point after point after point after point after point after point. And then not letting her, giving her any oxygen or any space to reply. And that's what it was. And so she actually physically had to call him out on it and say, are you going to let me reply or not? Oh, yeah, I'm going to let you reply. And then she starts talking, and all of a sudden, here he goes. He starts talking again. And he wasn't there to dialogue. He was there to get his points off. He was there to get his shit off. He was there to say what he wanted to say, heedless of heedless of whether or not it made sense, heedless of whether or not it aligned with the flow of the conversation. He didn't care. It was just, I'm getting my shit off. That another brother on there who he was doing the standard thing that black conservatives do, where it's and I it's a weird phenomenon, and I haven't given a name to it. Now, here's the crazy part. So I was talking about this last week, and then I see FD on Rap Latte, and he's kind of talking about the same thing. So I had to actually cut it off because I didn't want to steal his thoughts. I'm gonna go back and watch the whole thing so that I can see how in alignment we are. But um there's this weird thing that I've seen a lot of black conservatives do. And it's not just black conservatives who do it, but I've seen it's kind of a mechanism I've seen black conservatives roll out. It's being contrarian as praxis, as part of their process. It's part of the way they exist. They're contrarian, not because of information that they found that runs counter to a narrative that's out there or something that they feel is known information. It's, I'm going to take the opposite point just because, and that's it. Just because I don't want to do what other people are doing, I'm going to take the opposite point. And it doesn't have any thought. There's no specific reason or rhyme or reason why. So if we say the sky is blue, they're going to say, well, are you sure about that? A lot of flat earthers do that stuff. And so this contrarianism as praxis is one of those things that I do see a lot of black conservatives do. And the second dude fell into this trap because he came out and he had this whole definition about what conservatism is that doesn't necessarily align to what it is from a sociological standpoint. Um, you know, because all of it is neoliberal duality nonsense. But anyway, but all of it is neoliberalism stuff. But anyway, that's that. I digress. But it's this weird thing where he's like, I'm going to take the opposite side. And so he had this entire identity that he created around himself as a black conservative. And I believe in hard work and not, never taking handouts and this and that and all these things that seem to be way I grew up were kind of universal things, like, right? Like my mom was the same way, and she was far from a black conservative. She didn't believe in taking handouts, and she believed in hard work. You're making this your personality, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that you're trying to prove like you ain't the rest of like the rest of us niggas, and that's really what it is. And so when I see that, that's immediately what so you have to prove that you're different than the rest of us. To who? Well, typically it's juxtaposed against the white audience, because that's what the nature of this conservatism and liberalism stuff is, right? Like it's we're going to put you against a specific group. Like, so we're going to say, well, I'm different and other black people don't accept me because of my conservative beliefs. And it's like, no, we don't accept you because you're a nuisance. And you pick fights, and then you try to tell us we're all sheep or we're all blinded or you're smarter than all of us. And a lot of your interaction with us is super condescending, but then you don't be knowing what you're talking about at the time. That's what it is. You don't know how to interact with other black folks without saying, well, I'm an outsider, I'm a rebel, I'm out here and doing X, Y, and Z. And I'm saying this as a black nerd, where a black nerd has his own real, blurred life, and all the other stuff really does have its own sense, certain community and mores and stuff as a black nerd. And there's pockets of black nerdom that I don't really rock with. I don't like the black incels and the divestors, and I don't really align with passport bros and stuff like that. But that's cool. That's fine. The idea of this black conservative, they're conservative because they're going to show us how much they aren't like the rest of us. And then they beat us over the head with it. Like we're the immoral, dirty, unwashed Negroes, and here you are in your it's Uncle Ruckus, bro. Like literally, for those that missed the metaphor in Boondocks, Uncle Ruckus is really a send up of black conservatism. He's cranked up to 11. He looks like Clarence Thomas. He's literally based, like his model, his character model is Clarence Thomas. And so Uncle Ruckus in his character arc is defined by doing the opposite of what he thinks that black people do and presenting himself as an alternative for a population of white folks that are completely indifferent to how he presents himself, because he still gets treated like a second class citizen in the show. He's still doing menial jobs. What Daddy Ruckus say? He lives in a shack on the outskirts of town. Like that's who he was. And so the character Uncle Ruckus was really super built on, I'm not like the rest of these black folks. I don't even like these other black folks. I work hard and like these other black folks. Like that was his whole MO on the show. Everything he said, every time they interviewed him, every time they talked to him, he wanted to show that how different he was. You know, but he was worse off than any other black person in that town. He is disrespected more than any other black person in that town. And when he interacted with the white characters, they were totally indifferent to him. The only time he got recognized was when he was in his fantasy dream world where he got turned into a white person by Ronald Reagan in that show. That's a send up of black conservatism, y'all. Like, and so they took it and turned it up to 11, because for a lot of times we don't have an issue with some of the conservative talking points. I don't know. I can debate those all the time. But when you start telling me or trying to say, well, this is why I'm better than you because I believe in hard work because I'm a black conservative, but since you are leftist slash kind of agnostic, really, but more left-ish, you don't believe in hard work. Well, yeah, I do. I got 2 businesses. And I do a live stream every single week for fun that I have to edit along with my other work. I spend a lot of time doing the stuff I do. And I've always told my kids, if it's not worth working hard for, it ain't worth having. So he's created this other version of it. Like he's standing apart from the rest of us. And so that's what that dude's entire MO was. And the thing that made me turn it off was they brought out the little dude. Um, and I don't want to get into the ADOS shit. I know that he wasn't necessarily, after hindsight, I know he wasn't necessarily he was a first generation kid here. But and so there's some other anti-blackness that he's sorting through, because for those that don't know, if you don't know, the dividing line, yes, the diaspora among black people, there are layers to it and there's nuances to it, and yes, there's colorism within the black community, but there's also some dividing lines when it comes to sometimes black folks come from other countries, and since they're not necessarily familiar, since their perception of black America is formed off of the media that is presented of black America and images that they see of black America, they come in with a lot of the same biases and thinking that, well, because I'm from this other country, it's going to look different. I've actually talked to folks who have experienced this, where they thought it was going to be different, and they thought it was just this is just, it's just a function of how degenerate or whatnot, how black Americans are or whatnot. That then they experience it and they're like, oh, well, they don't see me as any different than you. Right. And they treat you just the same. Right. And it sucks, doesn't it? Yeah. But he comes from that kind of background where it's And imperialism has done a number on all of us around the world. You know what I'm saying? It's given us some weird mind states and things like that. But one of the challenges is, and this is kind of what I'm saying. Um, this young man came in, and so Amanda Seales started talking about the history of redlining and how there are economic barriers put up against Black people that he was not aware of. And instead of saying, "Oh, I wasn't aware of that," he's like, "I don't believe in that." And she's like, well, empirically is actually proven that redlining is a thing that did exist. Um, and when we move from de jure segregation to de facto segregation, they kind of used redlining still as a bridge to keep us boxed into a specific community or whatnot. He's like, I don't believe in that. That's why I turned it off. Because if we can't agree on a standard of reality, then there's no more conversation that needs to be had. If I can't give you something that is objectively true and steeped in reality, but you want to agree to something that is not provable, or you want to disagree with something that is actually provable and factually exists, then we have nothing else to discuss. If we cannot agree on a standard of reality that we're debating, it's just nothing else to discuss. So I turned it off and said, fuck this, I'm done. I cannot listen to this. And a lot of it had to do with some of the Black conservative talking points. The other side of it had to do with just it's exhausting listening to argumentation as sport. I'm kind of over it in general because it's not entertaining and it's not done to expand somebody's horizons or get them to think differently. It's done to belligerently shout your points at somebody else. And that's not something I align with. So Jubilee is a CIA operation. I'm standing on that square. Okay. Another thing, because one of the things is they pivoted because the second dude on there were in the process of saying, well, I'm not like the rest of you dirty shiftless Negroes. He also started these strident defenses of white folks where they weren't really necessary. Nobody was really, we're talking about us and the concept of our community. And so he flips it into like, well, she's attacking these. And it's like, bro, what are you doing? That's what it just turned me off. Like, I need to shut this off. Okay. But Jubilee isn't dialogue. It's just arguments, packages, conversations, and not even arguments. It's people shouting points belligerently at each other. And people utilizing bad faith rhetorical tricks to try to win the interaction. And that's not what debate is. Okay. And then the aftermath of it, like the aftermath, I go online, looking up Jubilee, Amanda Seales, and then all the anti-Black thumbnails and stuff. And everybody in the conservative spaces, they all move in news cycles since our entire social media experience is driven by news cycles anymore. And there's very few organic movements that start. We saw a bunch of thumbnails. They got her looking crazy, talking about ignorant ghetto, blah, 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 gets put in her place by a Black conservative. And it was just the most boring, banal, dog whistle racism that you're ever going to find. That's what it was. And so I'm like, but this is what Jubilee created. This is exactly what they created. And so when I saw the advertisement of Black men versus Black women, like, oh God, every Black incel, and was it men going their own ways and red pillar, they're going to be taking clips of this. They're going to be having content for months based on this. And so I'm like, I don't even want it in my feed. I don't. Accidentally this afternoon, I made the mistake of commenting on some passport bro shit, and I regret that to this. I regret that right now. So, all right. Fuck Thomas Sowell. Or fuck Thomas Sowell. I meant to throw this in there last week and kind of expand on why, because it kind of dovetails off of the Black conservative thing. And so that's why I wanted to have the conversation about Thomas Sowell. here's my take on it, and I'd have a whole lot more to say, but it's going to have to be a standalone thing because I do not want this to dominate. It puts me in a bad place with him. Um, my issue with Thomas Sowell is this, um, and the way that he's utilized to muzzle black people, because that's one aspect of it. He is the only black person that a white conservative will use because they can't find any other black people that reflect what they're saying. So it's going to be Ben Carson or Thomas Sowell or Clarence Thomas or somebody along those lines. More times than not, it's Thomas Sowell because they view him as some kind of neutral party, and he's really not. I mean, he's really not. His entire thing is, and I almost view it kind of because he's a pop culture figure now. He has this elevated importance. He's not necessarily respected upon in his field of study as an economist. Like his stuff has been debunked more times than most people who get talked about less than he does. And so he's not necessarily respected in that aspect of his academic study, and so he drifts over into social, sociology and social politics and stuff like that, socio-political stuff. His understanding of history is fraught. This man has not been in any sort of community with any black people in over 50 years. But whenever we're in an argument with a conservative and they bring him up, we're just supposed to defer to him because they see him as the smart Negro. And they must be arguing with the dumb Negro. I already gone into this thing about my IQ and stuff like that. I don't want to go into that again. But a lot of these people that they throw up as smarter than me, yes, they may have, from an academic standpoint, I don't disparage anybody's academic background. If they have academic rigor to back up what they're doing, props to you, bro. Like I never locked in. It's not something that's outside of my wheelhouse, but it's something I never locked in on. I was on that pathway of masters and eventually PhD and stuff, but life happened. So I kept a lot of the interests, a lot of the things I probably would have gotten advanced degrees in sociology, psychology, and stuff like that. So I study those, I read about them, but I'm not an academic level understanding of it. So I don't pretend to be about that. But just because somebody is an expert or has a level of expertise in one area does not mean that they're a genius in other areas. And that's kind of where we're at with Sowell. And so they use Sowell to kind of muzzle other black people who have dissenting opinions about them, and they throw that out there. But then it's like, so name another black political thinker who can back up what Thomas Sowell says. They can't do it because this is the only person they know. This is the only black academic they know. Can you cite some Clark, Du Bois, anything? Nope. Thomas Sowell is it. That is the end all be all of what it is, of what their understanding of blackness is. And so they use that, they'll throw him out there to shut you up. Okay. So here he is. He's a conservative economist, a longtime Hoover Institution fellow. So I mean, he has his credentials. I'm not disparaging that, but just because he has a credential doesn't mean he's necessarily like his works are necessarily revered among economists. He's written over 30 books about economics. And this is where the red flag comes in. So he's written over 30 books about economics, but then he crosses over into race and society. And some of his takes on race and society are frosty. Because it comes from a black person that is literally his function is to explain black people to white people. That's what he exists to do. I need y'all, because if there's anybody out there who is a white conservative who's done the Thomas Sowell thing and kind of try to use that to muzzle black people, understand this. His function is to explain black people to white people. He doesn't exist to give any frame of reference or any kind of education to a black person, because a lot of times he may not know any more than, because he hasn't been in community with black folks for a long time. And so, but that's what his function is. He is the Blackish of social commentators. The Emmanuel Ocho or Alcho or whatever that dude's name is on ESPN, where his job is to make blackness palatable for a wide audience and explain it to them. And that's what Soul does. But you're asking, you're throwing him in our face like we need to learn something from him, and he's the one that probably needs to spend some time actually around engaging with black people in a contemporary phase, because the last time he's really engaged with a black audience at any level, even when you go through his history, we're talking like when he is in Harlem, maybe a long ass time ago. He hasn't engaged with any black people in a contemporary basis. And so a lot of his opinions about what black life is and how black people exist is based on speculation from an outside perspective as well. So I want y'all to keep that in mind. I'm frustrated because they say he's considered, and I'm actually pulling quotes from the internet, so forgive me. But considered one of the most influential black conservative intellectuals, and there's a specific reason why. Because he's agreeable. He gives conservatives the black friend that agrees with them, and there's no more rigor applied to what he says than that. He agrees with me. That's the level of rigor that is applied to that. Fight me. I don't respect you. As soon as you start giving me quotes from him or talking about I need to read his books, I instantly just tune you out, because I don't want to give you my reading list. I don't want to give you the stuff that I need you to read, because you're not going to read it. If this is as far as you're going to go, if you're seriously throwing him in the conversation. Okay. He believes that racism only exists because black people keep talking about it. But the fact that he is the only people that cite his work are typically white conservatives. There's some black conservatives who do it too, but typically white conservatives, and they only do it in response to a black person making a point that they can't necessarily debunk through their own knowledge or anything. That's one. Two, they never, he's never mentioned, it's never mentioned with other black intellectuals. He's the only one that they use. And the only reason they use him is because they agree with him. Because if he was saying stuff they didn't necessarily agree with, they wouldn't even cite him. So does racism only exist because is that true? And how he is used is really insidious, because his quotes kind of get trotted out, and they basically say, see, this smart black guy over here says racism isn't a big deal. Get like him. Agree with him. Be agreeable. Be agreeable. Thomas says that you should be agreeable. Thomas says that you should agree with me. And if you don't agree with me, you are trapped on the Democratic plantation or some other crazy dog whistle racism shit that should get you punched in the face. I mean, like, come on. Like, you start throwing out slavery metaphors when we're talking about politics, bro. That's insulting on a level that's not even, I don't think people understand that. But they use him to shut down our conversation. And then they won't engage with any other black intellectuals, even more contemporary ones. They won't engage with them. He's their black friend. And my black friend says that you are supposed to agree with me. That's how it works. He's used his cover for actually super racist. He's kind of used his cover for actually like bad actors. And I throw Candace Owens in here. Candace Owens is a grifter. And her niche is saying a bunch of super anti-black shit and getting people all riled up in it. That's what her niche is. She failed as a liberal commenter, a liberal talking head, and so she found it was lucrative to jump over to the other side. That's what her MO is. I don't necessarily believe that she believes the shit that she believes, but that's where her bread is buttered. And that's where she makes her money. And so, but you're Ben Shapiro's who's been openly racist, um, Prager, who is a white nationalist, etc. That's who he gets trotted out by. People who are bad faith actors and don't really have any good plan envisioned for the black community. Candace Owens, she sees us as a target that she can generate outrage from and sometimes get people, rally people to her side occasionally. That's where you have, your Charleston whites and things like that, um, who are also agents of, white nationalism and blackface, if you will. But he becomes a way to shut down conversations about systematic racism, not to engage in them, but to shut them down, because it's an uncomfortable place for these people to be, because um, it's shaky ground, and so they rather shut down or neutralize the conversation. Neutralize the conversation by bringing out this dude, and that's what happens. They neutralize the conversation by bringing out Soul. We start doing Soul Crows. The idea is, well, we're not going to talk about systematic racism anymore because I'm shutting down the conversation because Thomas Sowell says it doesn't exist. So I'm not even going to engage with your experience with it, because this dude that hasn't been in community with black folks for at least 50 years says that you guys are making it all up. It minimizes lived experience. It equates systematic critique with race hustling, which is a slippery slope, because as soon as you start saying, well, you're not allowed to critique things, or you're not allowed to talk about what your experience is, you're basically saying, I don't want to I don't want you to use your real experience to disprove my imaginary world that I have in my head. It makes anti-racism theory sound like a grift instead of a real response. And so here's the thing: that is his grift. His grift is explaining black people to white people. That's his grift. That's really what it is. That's where his bread is buttered. That's where he's a pop culture figure, to be honest with you. He's not even really a social commentator as much as he's a pop culture figure. Okay. And then there's black folks who quote Soul, they get propped up as the good ones, and then we get otherized, the rest of us, when we're like, yeah, that's bullshit. Would you ask Clarence Thomas about what his experiences are with black people when he's actively tried to avoid us for the last 60 years? Why are we asking him? He's okay, and this is one thing this is why I'm a little bit harder on him, because I have some issues with this idea that somehow black people the entire soul thing is, sorry, I'm adjusting my glasses. The entire soul thing is, our wretchedness as a people is the reason why it has to do with our wretchedness as a people. That's his entire thesis is, we're just wretched people and we just need to do better. If somehow we were more presentable, if somehow we were if we made ourselves less of a target. It's kind of the concept of bullying, right? Like, the idea that, it's not the fact there are too many bullies, it's the fact there are too many potential victims. If people wouldn't make themselves victims, then they wouldn't get victimized, right? So that's kind of what the concept is. You have an entire system that is built to otherize you and marginalize you in every walk of life and put you on the fringes and let you know at every turn that you are not the default. You are another. But then you have other people saying, well, that doesn't matter. But it does when I walk into a job interview and I am the best qualified candidate there, but that person that's interviewing me might have a small bias against me and I don't know. So it's the frustrating part. They prop him up and they get propped up as the good ones, but he argues his disparities are due to culture and not systems. And that's a very slippery slope, because now you're saying, well, you guys just suck. And that's why you guys are impoverished. Not like in Omaha, very specifically. Not that we took a freeway and dropped it in the middle of the historically black neighborhood, destroyed all the homes, destroyed all the business, destroyed all schools, destroyed all the churches, destroyed all that all that wealth, all that money, all that capital that this group of black people would have passed down to the subsequent generation of black people. We took that away from you while allowing the rest of the city to have access to that. But you're not allowed access to pass down property and things like that to your kids because we dropped a freeway on top of it and offered you nothing in exchange. We're going to pretend like that has something to do with something inherently wrong with black folks. And I don't agree with that. And I know Omaha's just an example, but it's happened in every single major city. Look it up. Look up where these highways are situated. You know, and why so many black people live around these highways and interstates, and they're getting all the car exhaust and all this other stuff, and the health outcomes are negative and things like that. The big coal plant that we have in North Omaha, that, you know, all the lead, you know, all these other things where they had to do all this lead mitigation and stuff, all of it situated in the black part of town. Why is that? Is that because we're wretched? Is that because we're inherently wretched as a people? Or was there some grand design? Was there a bigger design there? Ask yourself, especially in Omaha, and I'm going super local, so for those that are international, I'm sorry. Ask yourself why that same freeway that was dropped in the middle of the black community, the historically black community that wiped out hundreds to thousands of homes and property rights of black folks in this city, why it ends right where the historically white neighborhood started. Why is the freeway just cut off right there? Why does it terminate right there? Is it because we're wretched? There's moral issues? Or was there something bigger at play? You be the judge. Why Omaha is still one of the most segregated cities in 2025? I'm just asking why black wealth here, you know, why black poverty rates here are so much out of step with what the rest of the country is experiencing. A lot of it has to do with the fact that it was so recent. Like that freeway, that entire freeway incident happened in the 70s. Like that was finished in the 70s. They took a whole generation of black people's property and buried it under the freeway and gave them nothing and made them nomads in the city. Made them went from being homeowners to renters just like that, with nothing to show for it. And you wonder why that, you know, they're 3 or 4 generations deep in poverty cycles because their parents were forced to rent. The parents couldn't pass anything down to them. And so either you had to strike the lottery and make it out and get in a position where you could actually be a homeowner or a property owner, or you had to repeat the pattern that your parents were going through. You know, whereas I know a lot of people who inherited homes, you know, fortunately were fortunate enough to inherit a home that was able to buoy them or have some kind of inheritance where they could utilize it to advance their family's goals and build a foundation for their lives. So that's what I'm saying. All right. I don't want to talk about this dude anymore. But the idea is Soul's stuff has been weaponized. It's a weapon against black people. It's a way to shut our conversations down. That's it. Just to shut us up. Okay, I got 2 more things, and I'm getting off this to go spend some time with my wife because it is my anniversary. But I got to get this stuff off my chest. So I actually did a recording about this that was kind of a standalone thing, but I wanted to kind of touch base with it because I was really frustrated with on social media. The entire Drake and Kendrick thing has really exposed something that a lot of people weren't aware of. I was aware of it. I did radio. I did college radio. I know how these entertainment cycles kind of work. A lot of people weren't necessarily hip to this. The content, the idea of this media bubble or content bubble, whatever you want to call it, a media silo, where stan culture is really the culprit behind this, where you can say you're a stan of a certain artist and you only consume stuff that either features that artist or has artists that are associated with that artist or stuff from that artist themselves. And that becomes your entire universe of how you view music specifically. Your entire music worldview is shaped by this one artist. And that is really weird to me. And I don't, if you are a Swiftie and all you listen to is Taylor Swift stuff, or you're in the Beehive and all you really do is listen to stuff that's Beyonce and artists tied to her. Okay. Or all you do is listen to Kendrick and artists tied to Top Dog Entertainment and him. All you listen to is artists in Drake's universe or their orbit. That's fine. That's fine. That is your choice. Do not and try to engage actual regular hip hop fans who just are fans of specific artists, but they're not where that's their end all be all. Do not and try to engage us in dialect or conversations, because what happens is you are coming in with a framework of knowledge about everything around this specific artist, and we're coming in with the framework of all the other artists that are existing out in this universe. And your viewpoint is this is the only artist that matters. And for me, I'm like, there's so many other musicians out there that are doing stuff that are great and awesome. We can't just get locked into this one place. And then invariably, when you find somebody that does not align with your specific artist, then you turn into angry, bitter 11th grade girlfriends or boyfriends. And you're going to defend your man's honor, defend your rapper's honor. Going to defend Nicki Minaj's honor when nobody's attacking her and nobody's saying, nobody's attacking her specifically. We're just not mentioning her. We're not thinking about her. Well, I'm going to shoehorn her in because that's the only frame of reference I have for hip hop. Literally, she's the only frame of reference that some people have. Drake fans, and I'm picking on y'all specifically because you guys are the most recent ones and you guys are the ones that are the most argumentative about this. There's Drake fans, and that's cool. You can be a fan. I don't care. But then there are also the Drake stans. When we start talking about like your Twitter handle is something OVO or something weird like that, you're slipping into the stan thing, and you try to have conversations with normal hip hop fans, and get mad when we don't center your guy, when we don't think your guy is the most important artist that's ever done anything in music. And I've experienced it directly. Let me move my chair up a little bit. I've experienced it directly. Well, hip hop's boring when Drake's not dropping stuff. Like, there's so much good music that's coming out right now. Are you serious right now? It's really been boring since hip hop. Hey, I got Lupe. It's like I'm sitting there trying to run down all the different things. Like I'm bumping the GID. I'm bumping, the Griselda affiliate still dropping stuff. Ab Soul's album still is banging. Like there's so much. Tyler the Creator's dropping something. Earl Sweatshirt stuff is kind of hot. Like there's all kinds of other good music out there. But it's like, man, Drake ain't dropped nothing, man. So that's it. That's end all be all. That's weird to me, bro. When there's so many other artists out there. And that's why I say I don't want to engage y'all in conversations when you are so fixated on this one artist and you need me to talk about, to be locked in on how wonderful and great your artist is. That's weird to me, bro. I don't care. I don't care. Stans are hyper defensive and it's blind loyalty. Y'all stand on some of the weirdest shit ever. It's fine when Drake is subliminally dissing people and outing family members and stuff like that. But when somebody does it to him, i.e. with the Pusha thing, oh, it's wrong. It's below the belt, man. That's not how the game goes. What? And here's the thing. Algorithms love it because it's guaranteed engagement for them. And I'm going to get more into algorithms here in a second, but it is guaranteed engagement. That is the one thing I know. Algorithms are going to incentivize you to engage because they want you to stay on platform. Okay. But fans end up getting siloed off. They only mess with artists that are linked to their favorite artists. And you forget that all these other artists exist out there. So you assume that nobody's listening to these artists because you're not listening to them. I heard so many people talk about, well, ain't nobody listening to that clips. Everybody I know and I talk to listens to the clips. Online, offline, everybody was bumping that this summer. The ones that weren't bumping it were the Drake fans. And even some of them were riding along with it. It was more the Drake stands that weren't aligning with it. And then they assumed that everything that Pusha said when he was talking about like Jim Jones, they thought he was talking about, oh, you just can't let the Drake thing go. He's not even talking about your guy, bro. Are you serious right now? He's addressing something that Jim Jones just said. But you're so in this Drake content bubble that you think everything, all roads lead back to him. And we ain't living like that. A lot of the hip hop heads, or the older hip hop heads, we don't exist in that world. Now, I'm not going to front. There are hip hop heads of my age that did the same thing with Biggie and Pac. You know, all they listened to was Biggie and Pac or Death Row, or they were strictly No Limit or whatever. And we didn't really take them seriously, bro. Like, we didn't engage with them like that. You know, I was a huge Wu fan, but I even listened to people outside Wu. I didn't just exclusively listen to only Wu projects. One, because some of them, once you started getting down to some of them other Wu affiliates, there was some unlistenable shit happening on those albums. My boy OD, he tried to get that Killer Bee Chronicles or whatever. That was trash, bro. Like, that was trash. So there's some unlistenable Wu-Tang albums or affiliate Wu-Tang albums. And there were some that were really good, but they were kind of loosely affiliates, like King Just, kind of loosely affiliates. But I was never that big where, like, this is the only thing I'm going to listen to. This is the only group I'm going to listen to. And I've been fans of Native Tongues. Tribe Called Quest really defined a lot of my hip hop journey. But I was also in the Hit Squad and Def Squad, EPMD. You know, I was always into different artists that I liked. I was huge into Q and 5, and those that know about Q&5 know about Q&5. They made some really incredible music. Substantial still out there doing stuff. I know Cunning Linguist just dropped something, dropped a new EP that was really good. And so, but I'll link to a crew and listen to who's in the crew, but I don't make them the only thing I listen to or the only frame of reference I have into music. I spend some time with them, and then I kind of go off and do my own thing. I enjoy the craft. I enjoy the art. I enjoy the culture. And so stan culture has always been weird to me, specifically when it comes to hip hop. Stan culture within hip hop is really weird to me because that's not what the game is about in my mind. And I think, if you're consuming stan if you're consuming hip hop like a K-pop fan, then we got a problem. Okay. But it's all tied into the attention economy, right? So artists end up becoming engines for content. And so a lot of when the Drake, and I did a video about this on a marketing channel, but one of the things that Kendrick did was took advantage of how these social media platforms work. Took advantage specifically of how YouTube is tied to Google. And so if something is ranking on YouTube, then it ranks on Google and vice versa. And so if you get a lot of people talking about your project, i.e., you use that huge community of reaction streamers that exist on YouTube where they react to new albums and stuff or react to new singles and stuff. If you can leverage that and get them pumping your content constantly, you can supercharge the results and absolutely dominate every single search on Google. And that's what he did. Simple. I called it. I knew what it was when I saw it. He's essentially hijacking Google. And he's leveraging YouTube to do it. It's just understanding how the algorithm works. And I'm about to tell you that nobody knows how the algorithm works, but it's having a loose understanding of how SEO works. And I don't want to say algorithm, let's say how search engine optimization works and how these algorithms are, at the end of the day, even though we may not know all the details, they're attuned for engagement. They're going to be driving the content that's going to keep people on platform the longest. Okay. Now I'm using that to pivot into something else. As y'all know, y'all might see my stuff on TikTok, right? Like, you might see these clips on TikTok. I'm figuring out exactly what to do with the longer form content because I have these live streams. They're just kind of sitting in my YouTube and I need to repurpose them and kind of extract the best points and kind of toss out the rest. But I also want those that are in line with my more stream of consciousness stuff to lock into, because I want to put a lane for that. So I'm thinking about putting the longer uncut versions on Patreon, having the shorter videos on YouTube, and then having clips on TikTok. So I'm on TikTok. And I'm getting a good response. I love y'all on there, man. Y'all have been showing me love. I really do appreciate it. The thing I don't appreciate about TikTok is, for some reason, I've fallen down this content hole on TikTok where every video on TikTok is how to grow on TikTok. And invariably it's, hey guys, for those that don't know, TikTok rolled out this new feature. Okay. You need to do blah, 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 to do blah, 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 blah. And your videos will go from this to this. And this is the new algorithm. This is how the algorithm works and blah, blah, blah. And so you're having people that are positioned because they had a viral video or a couple of viral videos. They position themselves as experts in making things go viral on TikTok, and they're going to sell you on it. They're going to absolutely sell you virality. Here's the thing, and I know this as a marketer because that's what I do as my day job. Virality is less important than consistency. Having a consistent audience that tunes in and aligns with you, I'd rather have alignment than virality. Okay. And so I'd rather have a smaller audience who aligns with the way I talk, the way I turn a phrase, the way I communicate my thoughts, the messages I put out there. I'd rather have them connect with me that way than shotgun blast my content out there and catch this big, huge audience where I'm going to have some people that agree, a lot of people who don't, some people that are in line with my message, a bunch of people that aren't, a lot of people that are indifferent. I don't want that. I'd rather have our audience that messes with me. Okay. I'm saying all that to say this, y'all. Nobody knows how the algorithm works. People that work at these places don't even know how the algorithm works, because there's a lot of machine learning. There's a lot of high level conversations that your run of the mill TikTok developers aren't privy to. And so they may be working on a component of the entire search algorithm. They may be working on a piece of it, but they don't know what somebody else is doing on this end or what somebody's doing on that end. These people don't know. If the people who work there do not know how the algorithm works, then you're telling me that the person on your TikTok telling you this is how you hack the algorithm, they know less than they do. They know less than the employee does. But they're definitely going to sell you on their course on how they did it. Okay. A lot of gurus sitting there, they're going to promise to blow up overnight and stuff. And so my feed is contaminated with, if you staple your eyelids to your top lip, TikTok, and then play this sound for 7 seconds at the beginning of the video, I did that and it boosted my count, boosted my views from 200 to 3,000. And they're giving this as advice just because it worked for them once or twice as a one-off. The thing with the algorithms is they're going to be constantly changing to evolve to patterns of human behavior. Basically, collectively, patterns of human behavior are going to shift and change. It's going to ebb and flow with the seasons or what's going on in the world and stuff like that. It's going to be this ongoing, evolving beast. At the end of the day, if you know this is what matters. Your social media platforms are trying to keep you on platform. They're going to show you content that you either love or content that you either hate. You either love the content or hate the content. That's how it works. Because both of them are going to keep you on platform. If it's, I know for a while, Facebook was literally just showing me people that I argued with. So I stopped arguing with people. I stopped seeing their stuff on my feed. Because Facebook's like, oh, well, he's not engaging with this anymore, so I need to figure out something else to engage him with. TikTok's going to do the same thing. All these social media platforms are going to show you content designed to keep you on platform because that's how they make their ad revenue. Okay. So in my estimation, it's better to find an audience that sticks around and listens to what you have to say and is aligned with you than it is to have, 10,000 people that have never seen you and they don't care what you're saying. And so they're going to watch you for 2 seconds and then click off. So that's just my take. But yeah, the Googles are the Googles. The gurus are promising to blow up overnight. Weird, post 3, 5, 10, 20, 15, 100 times a day. Hook in 3 seconds, stitch, duet, blah, blah, blah. All this stuff. For ADHD person is frustrating because I did a thing about circumstantial speech. That's my biggest video. And circumstantial speech is where you include a lot of tangents so that you're not misunderstood. It's kind of an ADHD feature. And so it's a hard time getting to a hard and fast point because we're scared that we might skip important context. Okay. I did that and it was a longer video. It was outside the conventions of a normal TikTok video. That's doing better than a lot of my other stuff on the platform. This was almost a 9-minute video of me talking about this. It flies in the face of what the guru who popped up that prompted me to make the video, where they're like, you got 7 seconds to hook people, which is true. Like that's the attention economy on social media. It's getting shorter and shorter. But I have 7 seconds to hook disinterested people, but I got all the time I need to hook people that are interested in what I'm saying, as long as I speak to something that aligns with their interests. Okay. So here's the reality. Nobody knows how these algorithms work. Machine learning adjusts constantly. Okay. And even the people that work on these platforms don't quite know how the algorithm works all the way, because that's proprietary information. If you have a scientist that understands the entire algorithm, or the developer that understands the entire algorithm, they end up becoming a mercenary. They can go anywhere and take that information. Facebook and YouTube would kill to understand how TikTok's algorithm works. It's just how it works. But the problem with all these hacks for quick growth, it pushes quantity over sustainability. You end up becoming another shill of the next trend that's coming up. You just end up becoming this person where you're not doing anything substantive. All you're doing is just aligning with this trend so people can see you, and they never connect with you in any meaningful way. The ones that are winning on, and I'm just spitballing here, but I think the ones that are winning on TikTok are the ones that have a unique way of presenting, unique subject matter. It's not just trend based. They're establishing a lot of the trends that people are copying. They ain't doing it, and they're doing it by being themselves. Okay. Chasing virality will lead to burnout. Like if you're always chasing virality, you never get that feedback. Like, you never get the good feedback, because, the gap between, if you make a video that doesn't do huge numbers, but it does really well, you don't get that it doesn't feel as good. Chasing virality, it can't be for everybody. Not every video you make is going to go viral, nor should you make every video to go viral. In my mind, I think a good video is going to go viral on its own. Okay. And from a business standpoint, there's no loyalty or conversions from it. And so that's from my endpoint as a marketer. That's what I do. My conversions are people subscribing to my channel, listening to me, engaging with me in the comments and stuff like that. I dropped the ball a little bit just because I couldn't see some of the comments that were coming through. So Mark Anthony, I apologize, brother. I did not even see the fact that I was getting comments, because normally I don't. So please tune in next week, bro. And I'll be a little bit more on top of that. Okay. So for me, TikTok tips are a lot of survivorship bias. It's like winning the lottery and then selling your process for picking lottery numbers. There's going to be somebody that buys it, but that doesn't make you an expert. It doesn't mean you have some insider knowledge of how lotteries work. Okay. And post as frequently as you want to, or as little as you want to, and post the content you want to post. Share who you are. Okay. Sorry. Got something in my teeth. Share who you are. All right. All right. So let's wrap this thing up. Okay. Marvel's destroyed the concept of Omega level mutants. They need to dial it back, and they need to dial it back expeditiously. Fuck Thomas Sowell. Jubilee is a CIA operation. Stan culture, specifically Drake fans, are really just destroying any kind of conversation about any kind of nuanced conversation about hip hop. And TikTok, there's gonna be gurus out there that try to sell you their ways of going viral. These people don't know. They don't even know how they went viral. At best they can guess. And if it's happened more than once, then they can really try to sell you on that line of dreams. Um, are your purposes like, do you have to go viral to achieve what you want to achieve on TikTok? Or do you want to build an audience? For me, building an audience is more sustainable. I'd rather do that than um, build people that know me from viral hits, and then when they come into my regular content, they're expecting the same viral content, and I'm not be able to produce that. I'd rather people align with me or connect with me because they align with me or connect with me. All right, so that's what I got, y'all. I appreciate y'all's time. Thanks for tuning in. um I'll be back next week. Hopefully, I know I keep talking about it, but I'm gonna have my Patreon set up, and I'm gonna have some longer videos on YouTube coming, that are clips of this, and then other stuff that's not necessarily related to it. So tune in there. I am on YouTube. I'm gonna be back on my Instagram channel, and I'm on TikTok, and that's where you can find us. And then the Patreon community, I'm trying to figure out how Discord servers work. I'm having a Discord server. You're going to get uncut stuff. You're going to get to do more requests and stuff. I might even start doing reactions on there, just because I do consume a lot of media. I don't necessarily know how the reactions work on YouTube, and I'm a little bit scared of it, but I may start doing them on Patreon. I'm see how it goes. All right. I appreciate y'all's time. Thanks for tuning in. I will check y'all out next Tuesday. It's been Blurting While Dad. Talk to y'all later. Peace.